Winning Blueprint presents.
Draft Zone.
Welcome to the Draft Zone. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. This is the 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series. What we aim to do here with this program is look at the 2013 NFL Draft of every single team in the National Football League. Today we'll be talking about the Cleveland Browns. An interesting draft by the Browns, but we'll still talk about their draft extensively. Now, we'll take every single pick into consideration when looking at the Cleveland Browns draft as a whole. We'll look at every individual pick, and not just the player. We're talking about the player, the pick itself, how it was made, when it was made, and how these players might impact the Cleveland Browns in the 2013 season and moving forward. We'll grade them out using our baseball grading scale, as we always do here in the lab room and in the draft zone. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the draft wrap-up series, as we can never tell if, in fact, these players will succeed in the National Football League or not. And you can't really say that a team reached for a player or not. One team's second-round selection could be another team's fourth-round selection. You can't tell if a team reached for a guy or not. If it's their guy, it's their guy. They need to get him when they can. So there will be no strikeouts here in the draft wrap-up series. Now, looking at the Cleveland Browns, we'll dissect their draft, give them a grade for each individual pick, tally them all up, get an aggregate score for the Cleveland Browns draft as a whole, and then move on from there. So, got the big board behind me with all the draft picks on it. As we all know, if you've been following the series, the handy-dandy pointer has been a huge part of this. He's no longer with us. Like in the National Football League, here on this show, next man up, magic wand present. Let's get to the draft board and get busy with the Cleveland Browns. So, you look at the needs, and you look at this draft, and you realize quickly, it's only 5 picks. You know how some teams pass on a position in a draft? Give you an example. 2011, Washington Redskins have a top 10 pick. They decide to pass on the quarterback position because they don't see a quarterback in the top 10 being worthy of being selected. Or, for that matter, any quarterback in that draft being worthy of selection. And they decide to trade out of the top 10. And they just go with Rex Grossman and John Beck as their options at the quarterback for that season. Now, look, it was a disaster in terms of the decision because that season was essentially wasted. But it's a smart move because they realized none of the quarterbacks in that draft, of course, I'm speaking of the draft with Jake Locker, Christian Ponder, and Blaine Gabbert. So they just elected to pass on quarterback altogether in that draft. Luckily enough for them, it yielded them Robert Griffin III. All is forgiven, all is well in Redskin land. Back to the Cleveland Browns, however, I've never seen a team collectively pass on a whole entire draft. But it seems like that's what the Cleveland Browns essentially did in 2013. They passed on the entire draft. How many times can you trade out of your own selection and not draft anybody? Now, maybe down the road, they'll reap the benefits of trading back a million times. But right now, if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, you're a little bit upset because you probably feel like, hey, our team isn't good enough to not select players. What are we doing? They're building for the future. It's a new regime, new head coach, new GM. You've got Chizinski in there at the head coach. You got your new GM in Michael Lombardi. And so maybe some of the stuff in this draft wasn't as appealing to them as to some of these other teams around the league. And they feel like, hey, the crop of players coming out next year is going to be much better than the one that is here this year. Let's not worry about this draft. Let's just focus in on next year's draft by stockpiling picks for the future. Maybe that was their thinking. I don't know. But I've never seen a team pass on an entire draft altogether like the Browns did in 2013. But let's talk about the draft. We look at the needs. Cornerback. They want a cornerback to go with Joe Hayden out there. And so cornerback definitely needs safety. They need to shore up that secondary. And too many times in 2012, the Browns gave up big plays and chunk plays in the secondary. Cornerback was a problem, so was safety. Quarterback. I'm a guy that feels like Brandon Weeden deserves an opportunity. I don't think they need to shun him and push him out of the door too quickly. Give him an opportunity to show what he can do. He is a first-round selection. Give him an opportunity to prove that he belongs. But you do need a backup quarterback. Colt McCoy no longer in Cleveland. You do need a young backup. Would be nice. Defensive line. Simply put, you can always have defensive linemen. There can never be a shortage of defensive linemen. There can never be a surplus of defensive linemen. You can always use defensive linemen. End of discussion. Linebacker. You're playing a 3-4 defense. It's an aggressive scheme. They got a new defensive coordinator. And so you got to be able to have the horses up front on that defensive line, which the Browns somewhat do. And you got to have the guys off the edges to get pressure on the quarterback. They've made strides in the offseason to try to make that happen. Be nice to get some more pieces in the draft as well. So you look at round, pick, players, position, school. First round, 6th overall selection, linebacker out of LSU, Barkevious Mingo. I have him listed as a linebacker. Technically, he's a defensive end, but he's playing outside linebacker in the National Football League. No doubt about it. So, look, he's exactly what the Browns are looking for at that Leo position. He's a guy that you turn him loose. You send him after the quarterback to get pressure. In this day and age in the National Football League, pressure is paramount. You got to have it. You got to get guys that can get to the quarterback. If you can't apply pressure to the quarterback, you won't win in this league. Simple as that. The quarterbacks are too good. Offensive coordinators are too skilled. They're going to put together a game plan that is going to dissect defenses. And if the quarterback that you're playing against is an elite quarterback, you can forget about it. The only way to rattle the cages of these quarterbacks that are really good in this league is pressure. No one likes it. No one handles it well. So guys like Barkevious Mingo are starting to become necessities. Guys that can get to the quarterback, or at least teams think they have the potential to get to the quarterback. So a guy like Barkevious Mingo becomes appealing. Long, very athletic defender. Very slender and thin frame, however, but doesn't matter. 6'2", 240, 245, very long frame. He doesn't look the part of a defensive end. He doesn't look the part of a linebacker because of the slender frame, because of how he is built. But you put on the tape and you realize this guy's a lot stronger than it appears. Don't judge this book by its cover. A lot more strength in here than meets the eye. And he does a great job of converting speed to power, because some guys are extremely fast, but they don't use that speed to build up that power. He does. And he has an explosive first step that really aids him in getting to the quarterback. He eats up a lot of space with big steps. So he's a guy that can get to a specific spot on the field very quickly because of the space that he eats up. He's a 4.5 40 guy, so the speed is there. Definitely. 4.57 40 means he can get from point A to point B very quickly at the linebacker position. He needs to develop some more moves. Right now, I think he's a one-trick pony. Explosion, go. That's what he's using to get to the quarterback. But when that doesn't work, he needs to have a counter. Right now, I don't think that exists with Barkevious Mingo. So that's something he'll have to develop at the next level. Also, you never want to hear a guy say, hey, I played when I wanted to. That's never good. But I think the Browns are willing to get past that, because he knows he has to play at a very high level every time he's on the football field. And he played his best football when he played against some stiff competition. Now, one of the things about Barkevious Mingo that you have to look out for is lack of production at LSU. Especially last year. 4.5 sacks. Never wowed you. Doesn't wow me. But all of the gifts that you look for in a very athletic, a freakishly athletic guy is here and exists with Barkevious Mingo. And I think that's what attracted teams to him in this draft. Now, I think he was very smart in coming out and foregoing his senior year, because going back for another year at LSU might have exposed him as a guy that maybe isn't as good as you think he is. Who knows? This guy could either be an all-pro outside linebacker that puts up big numbers getting to the quarterback year in and year out, or this guy could be another one of those very talented yet never really achieving his true potential in the National Football League type of players. I could easily see that being Barkevious Mingo. So him not going back to college, very smart on his part, because he could have been exposed. We see it happen all the time. And this guy never posted 12.5 sack numbers. He's just flashed brilliance at times that make you say, hey, man, this guy really has some extreme talent. Someone's going to take a risk on him. But if coached up, if he's willing to put in the work, we could be talking about a guy that can get you 12 to 14 sacks every single year in the National Football League. And as we know, that is a commodity that is extremely valued in the National Football League. So in the first round, 6th overall selection, linebacker out of LSU, Barkevious Mingo, is a home run. You can put it on the board, Browns. It's a home run in the form of Barkevious Mingo, because of the upside, because of the potential for this guy to be a star, especially in this league where you got to get pressure on the quarterback. Barkevious Mingo is a home run for the Cleveland Browns in the first round. So we move on to the third round. There is no second round selection, and we'll be saying that a lot about the Cleveland Browns in this draft. There isn't X pick in X said round. But we move on to the third round, 68th overall selection, cornerback out of San Diego State, Leon McFadden. I struggle with this pick a little bit because the Browns could have had a better option here at the cornerback position, and maybe they just felt like the other guys in the draft, or maybe the guy that they targeted and coveted wasn't around when they had a selection, and they just decided, hey, let's just get out of here in terms of the pick. So I don't know what the rationale was there, but I don't know if Leon McFadden is that guy that you put across from Joe Hayden. I don't know if they feel like he's the guy that you put across from Joe Hayden. Maybe they feel like, hey, we found our nickel guy. Now we'll go back next year, or we'll go into free agency and get the guy that we want to get across from Joe Hayden. I don't know. Maybe they feel like he's the guy you put across from Joe Hayden. Who knows? But Leon McFadden, much like B.W. Webb to me. Very smallish corner, very feisty corner. But what separates him from B.W. Webb is he can actually play man coverage. I don't think B.W. Webb is adept at playing man-to-man coverage quite yet, whereas Leon McFadden can play man-to-man coverage, can try and jam you at the line. He's not very good at it because of his smallish build. We're talking about a 5'10", 190, 195 type of corner. Very aggressive, very feisty, isn't afraid to come up and challenge receivers, isn't very good at it because of his size. Again, you get a 6'2", 6'3" guy that's 220 in front of him that knows how to handle himself at the line of scrimmage. He'll just toss guys like him aside and run up the field. Now, he has makeup speed, even though he doesn't possess top end speed, which is another concern of mine. He can make up some ground incredibly, even though he's not as fast as you would like to have your corner be. But I think that Leon McFadden has some attributes that you cannot deny. And one of them is the fact that this guy can catch the football. He's a walking play waiting to happen. At San Diego State, in his senior year, he had 3 interceptions. 2 of them went to the house for touchdowns. So that's saying something right there. As soon as he turns that defensive nature into offensive play, he's going the other way, looking for 7. So, and him being an ex-receiver pays dividends for him once he catches the football. And this is a guy that can give you some added value in the returns game if you see fit. So he brings a lot to this team in terms of versatility and playmaking ability. However, there's still doubts in my mind that he can get it done out wide consistently. He fights for the ball. He fights for 50-50 balls. If you don't throw it up high enough away from his frame, if he gets his hands on the football, it's going to be a struggle to get it away from him because he's very aggressive when going after the football. And again, like I just said, very strong hands, catches it very cleanly, is a natural hands catcher, ex-receiver, so he does not have any issues there, does Leon McFadden, but not a great tackler. He's what I call a shoulder soldier, okay? One of those guys that ducks his head, doesn't see what he's hitting, and just throws his shoulder out there recklessly, hoping to hit something. And a lot of times, what you'll find with shoulder soldiers is that, look, they're just taking a stab at it. They're just throwing a dart into the wind and hoping that it lands somewhere. They're just looking to get their shoulder out there, and they hope they hit something. But in this league, what you'll find is that guys are a lot more adept at leaping over defenders who don't see what they're hitting. So when that shoulder soldier comes up and he's trying to lower that shoulder and duck and just dive, you got tight ends now. It's not just receivers anymore. You got tight ends now who are 6'5", who are leaping over defenders like it's something that just naturally occurs. And so I don't know if he's going to be able to get away with that or not in the National Football League. He's not a great tackler. He's not a guy that sheds blocks very well. So I have questions about Leon McFadden's ability to play out wide in space in the National Football League, but he can make plays. That's for sure. There is a space on the field for him as a defender in your secondary. Definitely. I just don't know if that space and position is out wide for him or not. But nonetheless, in the 3rd round, 68th overall selection, cornerback out of San Diego State, Leon McFadden for me is a triple because I like the playmaking ability. Anytime you tell me there's a guy that can get the football in his hands and turn defense into offense immediately, sign me up. I'm on board for that every day of the week. And Leon McFadden is a guy that once he gets the football in his hands, turns into a playmaker, turns into an offensive player on the defensive side of the football. So it's a triple for me in the form of the cornerback out of San Diego State, Leon McFadden. So let's go to the needs board and clean up a few of these needs. You get a linebacker in the form of Barkevious Mingo. You get a cornerback in the form of Leon McFadden. So Browns knocked down a few needs. we go to the 6th round. Wow. So we go from the 3rd round, no 4th round, no 5th round, all the way to the 6th round. And I told you, if you've been following this series, that I feel like you build your football team, the core of your football team. In the 4th and 5th rounds is where you do your serious damage. The good teams find a way to stockpile 4th and 5th round selections. The teams that understand the draft game, they've got 2 or 3 4th round selections. They've got 2 or 3 5th round selections. That's where you get the core, the crux of your football team. The Browns don't have any of that. So that worries me a little bit. But again, they just passed on this whole draft. So we go on to the 6th round. Pick 175. Safety out of Notre Dame. Jamoris Slaughter. All right. He's a versatile defender at 6 foot, about $195 to 200 pounds, that can play free or strong safety. And again, in this league, that's something that I feel like is a necessity. You got to be able to play all the way back deep, and you got to be able to play up at the line of scrimmage. In this league, you got to be an interchangeable part at the safety position. You got to be able to play some free and some strong safety. And so Jamoris Slaughter can do that for you. Jamoris Slaughter is a jack of all trades when it comes to being a safety in this league, or at least at college. He was a guy that could blitz for you. He could play some great run defense as well, drop down into the box and be physical at the point of attack. He could also play back deep for you. Now, playing back deep in space isn't his greatest attribute, but he could do it nonetheless. But his size warrants a little bit of attention in terms of help, because he's not an explosive athlete. He's not a 4.5 40 guy. He's not a 4.4 40 guy. He's a 4.6 40 guy. So you can't just drop him down into the slot and say, hey, cover this guy. Don't let him out of your sight. Because if it's a little shifty slot receiver, he's going to get beat. If it's a guy with some speed, he's going to get beat. If it's a guy with some size, or if it's a tight end, and that tight end knows how to use his body, say like a Gavin Escobar, that's 6'6", that's going to be a problem. And look, for most safeties, 6'6" is going to be a problem. For Jamoris Slaughter, it is. And so there's questions about his ability to cover in space, but as a do-it-all safety, he can blitz, he can play the run, he can give you some support back half as a safety. You don't want him being a single high safety because he doesn't have the range you're looking for in terms of being able to cover the whole entire back half. But he can take one half of the field and do a great job in responsibility there. So I think what the Browns saw in Jamoris Slaughter was a guy that could be very versatile for them, a guy that can do some work on special teams as well. And this is the question that I have about him. He's coming off of an Achilles tendon tear, and so what is he going to be like when he comes back? He wasn't a superior athlete before the injury. What is he going to be like after he comes back from that injury? And he had a lot of injuries at Notre Dame, and so be interesting to see how he rebounds. But in the 6th round, 175th overall selection, safety out of Notre Dame, Jamoris Slaughter, for me, is, I want to give him a double, but it's a single because I just don't know what he's going to be after this Achilles injury. Got to see how he rebounds from that. It's a single for me in the 6th round. You look at the 7th round now, 217th overall selection from the Miami Dolphins, defensive end out of Eastern Central University in Oklahoma, Armani Bryant. And this is a very intriguing prospect, probably the most intriguing of all of the Brown selections in this draft. Because he went to a small school, no one knows who he is. You know how I feel about small school prospects. I don't care the competition that you played against. I don't care about that. I care about you. How did you fare? Did you dominate? That's all I ask for. Dominate your competition. Whether it's Division 1, 2, or 3, dominate. Especially if you go to a smaller school in a Division 2 or Division 3 school, dominate. You think you belong in the National Football League? Dominate. 95% of the guys you're playing around and against aren't going to the National Football League. So you need to dominate if you believe you belong in the National Football League. Armani Bryant did that. He did that. Double-digit sacks in consecutive years. Had 10.5 sacks before he got suspended. And this is the big issue with him off the field. He was suspended for selling marijuana to an undercover officer, which is a double whammy in itself. So you've got some off-the-field issues here. You've got a young man that was led off of the path. Now someone has to reel him in, find out mentally where he is, and figure out, does he want this bad enough? Do you want to play football? Does football mean everything to you? Does it mean enough for you to straighten up your life off the field? That's a question you've got to ask, because the talent is here. 6'4", 260, explosive athlete, can get to the quarterback. He dominated the competition at Eastern Central University. And so, look, if you do that, I have no complaints, no qualms about it. And again, he's the type of guy, he was a defensive end at Eastern Central University. I think he's a guy that you take his hand out of the ground and you let him stand up and get after the quarterback. And in this aggressive defense that the Browns will be employing this year, you got to think a guy like this is a very, very prized commodity for the Browns. Someone that they feel like, hey, if we can get the most out of this guy, we've got ourselves a steal in this draft. And they might be right. If they can get him to play with his head on straight, focus in on issues on the field and less about things off the field, they could have themselves a diamond in the rough here in the 7th round in Armani Bryant, defensive end at Eastern Central University. Now, the off-the-field issues are a question into themselves. But I tell you what, with the talent that this guy has, the explosion that he possessed, the ability to get to the quarterback, and that's innate. I think he just has a knack for getting to the quarterback. This is a double for me, because I'm anxious to see if this guy can put it all together. Being that he's very, very talented, little troubled off the field, but very talented, I want to see what he can do. So it's a double for me. In the 7th round, defensive end out of Eastern Central University, Armani Bryant. So we finish up this draft in the 7th round, 227th overall selection from the Cincinnati Bengals. Offensive tackle out of Chadron State, Garrett Gilkey. Simply put, a guy that translates probably more so to the guard position in the National Football League than at tackle. We're talking about a 6'6", 320 athlete here, which is kind of big for the guard position. Really, it is. But it's funny because you hear scouts talk about size at different positions, center, guard. In this league, it doesn't matter. If you're good, you're going to play. You could be 6'10" and play the guard position. If you can move, if you can get the job done, you'll be at the guard position. So Garrett Gilkey is one of those guys. An athlete, played at just about every sport you could imagine. He's played some basketball, he wrestled, played some track and field, football. So he's more athletic than people give him credit for, but he's not athletic enough to play at the tackle position in the National Football League. He's not fast enough. He doesn't move his feet fast enough. So he more so translates to the guard position. The only thing I don't like about him, and you know how I am about my offensive linemen, I like them to have a nasty disposition. I like them to be a little mean. He's a nice guy. He was bullied as a kid. He talks about it at the combine, how he was bullied as a high school student. Didn't have a lot of friends because of his red hair and his skinny build. And so he just blew up. He got big. He started to grow. He filled out his frame. Things changed for him. But at heart, he's a nice guy. he does have a bit of a mean streak in him, but you don't see it enough. They characterize him as a goofy kid, really. And so you're not getting the nastiness that you need out of an offensive lineman. And so I think Garrett Gilkey for me is a single because of the fact that A, he's not athletic enough to play tackle. B, you're going to have to kick him inside at guard. And C, he's just not nasty enough. He's not physically imposing. He just wants to do his job and go back to the huddle. I need a guy that wants to destroy the guy in front of him. Humiliate him. I don't think Garrett Gilkey is that guy. I think he just wants to get in your way. And if he does that, he's satisfied. So it's a single for me for the offensive tackle out of Chadron State. In the 7th round, pick 227, Garrett Gilkey. So let's clean up this needs board. You get a safety in the form of Jamoris Slaughter. You get a defensive lineman. I think he's going to be a linebacker, but right now, for the sake of the position he played in college, we'll go with a defensive end for Armani Bryant. And the Browns cleaned up everything except quarterback. Didn't think that was a huge need. And look, if you're going to pass on this whole draft, I don't mind you passing on quarterback, being that that was one of the positions that a lot of teams decided to pass on in this draft. So I'm not really that hard-pressed for the Browns to select a quarterback just to be selecting a quarterback. But you look at the draft as a whole, Mingo, a home run, McFadden, a triple, Slaughter, a single, Bryant, a double, Gilkey, a single. It barely averages out to a double. This was not an impressive draft by any stretch of the imagination by the Browns. They simply selected a few players that they felt were worthy and moved on. They passed on this draft as a whole. Really don't see that happen too often in the National Football League, but if anybody can pass on a whole entire draft, it's the Cleveland Browns. So that's going to do it for the Browns. It's a double in the 2013 NFL Draft wrap-up.
Draft Zone.